So let's get rolling with today's program. For those of you just joining us, welcome. It's great to have our solar fam back for the final town hall of the year. We know it's a super busy time and we really appreciate you all being here. And the question we've laid out today is, how can we bring solar and storage opportunities to everyone in the U.S.? How can we offer clean energy options to anyone who wants them? It's a big question, and there are big opportunities, and we're here to learn, share, and discuss how we can create the kind of solar industry that has a fair distribution of clean energy options for all communities. So we've got a lot of questions in advance from our audience, so thank you for those. And we do take questions as we go, so just pop those into the Q&A. And now I'm excited to get to our expert guests today. I would like first to introduce Ajulo Otho. She's the founder and CEO of Enerwealth, and we're going to bring her up on the screen in just a moment. Good morning, Ajulo. She is the founder and CEO of Enerwealth Solutions and a committee representative at Black-owned Solar Services Group, or the BOSS Group, which I believe is definitely the coolest name in the solar industry. So congratulations on that one. Welcome. Great to have you here today.
Good morning. Thanks.
And let's also welcome Heather Houston. She's the VP of People at Mosaic Solar and a steering committee representative at the new CEO-led initiative, Renewables Forward. Welcome today, Heather.
Hi, thanks so much.
And joining us is also Dana Sleeper. She's the Director of External Affairs at SEIA. We'll bring her up on the screen. Lovely to have you today, Dana. Thanks for joining us. On the solar contracting side, we have Jason Carney. Jason joined us for the July town hall, and he is the president of the Tennessee Solar Energy Association and CEO of Energy Electives. Welcome back, Jason. Great to have you again. And we have another solar contractor joining us today. His name is Kenneth Wells. Kenneth's got his start at Grid Alternatives and is now the owner and founder of O&M Solar Services in Los Angeles. Really happy you could join us today, Kenneth. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And both Jason and Kenneth's solar contracting stories and unique perspective in the industry are available in news articles and on NPR. So we recommend you guys go and check out their stories. They're very inspiring. So I was trying to figure out where to start the conversation today, and I kept coming back to the fact that solar deployment is such a community-oriented venture. Most solar sales are still done by referral. Solar contractors are embedded in their communities, and this is important because homeowners want to work with companies and people they trust, and because solar technology and its benefits are still relatively new to a lot of folks. It's important that solar contractors are seen as trustworthy and reliable, from the education that they provide during the solar sale up until later add-ons like EV charging and storage over the years. It can be like a years-long conversation that contractors have with homeowners. So I thought I'd kick us off today with talking about community. And Jason, I'd like to go to you first. I went back and pulled up a quote from your last time on your town hall, and you said this: folks need to see solar in their community, see the person who did it, and feel like that person is accessible. They also need to see how it can be profitable for them as a career. For African American communities, it's not so much a job as it is an economy. So can you talk about your role as a solar contractor and how that aligns with your place in your community?
Yeah, so first let me say thanks again to you, Tom, and Jessica, of course, for inviting me back. And it's great to be on a panel with great folks, especially Ajulo I've gotten very familiar with recently. So, and I always give honor to God for health and strength to do what I do. But to answer your question in particular, so my secret passion is as a mentor, and as a disciple of Christ, I've been given hope through his life and example. Hope is something you see with your eye or with your mind's eye, and it encourages and motivates you. I believe my role as a solar contractor or an energy consultant can provide encouragement or motivation to all that I come into contact with, and especially the marginalized and underserved. So hopefully that helps understand kind of how I try to fit in the community, hopefully as a mentor using solar and energy efficiency as a way to provide hope and encouragement.
Awesome. Kenneth, let's move over to you. When we chatted a few months back, you talked about the role of being in your community. What does being in your community mean to you? And how has it helped guide your life as a solar contractor?
Sure. I guess for me, being in my community, I look at it from the perspective of my journey and how I got into the industry. And one of these, I think I shared with you was, in order for me to get training to get into the solar industry, I would have to travel about two hours on public transportation to get to the closest training facility. And I had to do that for 4 months, after being out of prison for about maybe 2 months at that time. So you can imagine for a 21-year-old trying to figure out an opportunity for himself getting out of prison, how challenging that can be, and then have to figure out how to get the money to travel from point A to point B, which is 2 hours away. So, and then getting into the industry, there was no representation of individuals like myself to really bridge the gap to getting gainful employment. So those are the two challenges that I faced coming into this industry. And for me, what it looked like was, well, I still made it. I was able to, I'm 10 years into the industry. I'm a licensed general contractor, C10 contractor, NAPSEP certified, and work for some of the largest residential companies in the nation. And 2 years ago, decided to start my own company. And specifically what we do is reach back. We try to work with organizations that I came out of, like Grid Alternatives and Homeboy Industries. And we try to make sure those people not only get trained in that, we work hard to create a successful business model that those people can also get jobs once they get the training.
Awesome. And I'm going to come back to you in a little bit and talk about the role of mentorship, because that's something you really focus on in your company as well. Ajulo, your company, Enter Wealth, their website, it says, we develop projects that celebrate and elevate the inner wealth of rural communities by reinvesting in those communities, our communities. Can you talk about the intersection between your work, your community, and renewable energy?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I think as Jason and Ken so expertly talked about, Jason talking about his faith and Ken talking about his life experience, I think we all bring our personal perspective and experiences to this work. It is in how we define community, and also why we're in this business to begin with. This is part of my personal experience. I'm doing this for my children and my children's children, for sure. And as a member of a minority community, as an African-American woman, I bring that experience to the work that I'm doing as well. My experiences with misperceptions about me and my skill set, experiences with discrimination or structural barriers to my goals, all of that informs my work. And so what that has meant for me is that, first of all, I define community in a very inclusive way. I think the definition is really rooted in a context. And for me, it's an inclusive definition, but it could also be exclusive. It's also meant for me that I tend to have a work ethic that means that I work twice as hard and twice as long to prove my value. And my projects likewise tend to go above and beyond the prevailing value propositions because of that perspective that I bring. I'm also from the rural South, so I'm a country girl at heart. And the projects that I design are meant to really broaden the perspective about what it means to deploy clean energy within a particular setting, within a particular context. And for me, that context is within a rural community. And how can these projects have broader ripple effects within rural places and are not just reinforcing patterns of extractive industries where, a site is built and all of the resources are taken back out of the community, except for a few bits and pieces here and there. So that's how my perspective informs my work and my definition of community.
Mm-hmm. As we all know, there's no silver bullet when it comes to to creating the communities and solar industry that we want. We need cross-sectoral approaches. We need local initiatives, workforce development, and we need strong state and federal policies. And we have an audience question today from Mickey from North Carolina, and he or she asks, I'd like to hear more about the 2021 clean energy goals. And he suggested we toss it to Dana. SEIA has proposed an agenda, and I'm quoting here, to lay the foundation for a strong, clean energy economy that prioritizes equity and environmental justice. Can you talk a bit about the 2021 agenda for SEIA and how it will support equity and environmental justice?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So SEIA released what we called our 100-day plan for the Biden administration when the results of the election were called. And as part of that, we were talking about policy changes that we recommended, just really putting into a succinct list what the administration could look at doing in order to ensure that solar continued to grow around the country. And a large component of that, because it's one of our priorities as an organization, because it's our CEO's priority, and because it's a priority of our board of directors, is to ensure that there is access to renewable energy for all Americans. Our trade organization specifically focuses on the US, so that's why I caveat it there. Obviously, we'd love to see it spread much wider worldwide, but that's our focus. So as part of that particular plan, we built out what we call our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Leadership Council. And so that's a board level task force that we have. And it's made up of members of our board of directors that are extremely passionate about these types of issues. They directed us to produce several products, and we're going to be rolling those out in 2021. One of those items is a diverse suppliers database. So that particular product is designed to essentially uplift and showcase minority, women-owned businesses, basically diverse solar businesses all along the supply chain, so that those companies that maybe are larger and subcontract within our industry can reach out to them and can begin to diversify their own supplier networks. So that's one way that we're helping on that front. We're also on the policy front developing an equity and environmental justice policy platform. And we have a draft version of this right now that we're actually getting stakeholder input on at the moment to try to make sure that it's encompassing all of the policies that we want to push forward. The idea is to have this set of principles and then example policies from various states or federal programs that really, again, provide access, enable people to access solar, and do all of those things that we all feel so strongly about. We're also developing an industry certification program. This is one of the projects that I'm heading up. And the goal of that particular program is actually to ensure that there is diversity, inclusion, and those sorts of priorities are pushed forward within solar companies themselves. And so it's an opportunity for companies to basically go through an audit process with the National Trade Organization where we say, okay, yes, you've administered a ban the box protocol for your hiring so that formerly incarcerated individuals will not be unfairly viewed when they're applying to solar jobs. You receive X number of points for doing that activity. And there's a whole set of activities that companies can participate in, and eventually they'll receive a certification based off the number of points they receive. So we're trying to incentivize our companies through that process to make changes in their own hiring practices and how they retain and promote employees internally, that they would have structured mentorship programs in place, all of those sorts of things that can help promote inter-industry growth. And then finally, we have another project category, which is focused on professional development and mentorship. And we're working on developing products there as well. So there's a lot going on at SEIA in terms of our advocacy and our work for 2021 as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Awesome. Thank you for the update. Let's kick it over to Heather. This topic of diversity, equity, inclusion has been around for many years, but it really took a leap forward this year in the cultural discussions, as we all know. And I'd like to start to talk about some of the groups that are represented on this show today. And one of those is Renewables Forward. They have quite a few member organizations listed on the Renewables Forward website, SEIA being one of them, Mosaic, Next Tracker, Solar Foundation. Can you talk a bit about Renewables Forward and how it came about and how, that group is trying to advance equal equity and equal access in the solar industry? Yeah.
Sure. So in the spring, in response to everything that was going on with the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the outcries and the protests that were going on, a group of solar CEOs got together with the intent of what can we do collectively to take action. From that, they started to create what the framework would be, what their areas of focus are. The result of that was the Renewables Forward website. That's really the first step. We've since created a smaller steering committee. You can imagine when you have this group that's newly formed and you have all these people coming together, you're trying to figure out how you're going to collectively take action. And so we've created a steering committee and we've identified 4 subgroups with areas that we're focusing on. The intent of this group is really about taking action. It's not about signing your name that you're in support of something. It's that you are joining with the intent to get involved, to roll up your sleeves, to do the work. We have some members who are also members of organizations like SEIA, and we're aware of these other organizations to really try to make sure that we don't have overlap and that we're complementing and supporting each other. The 4 primary focuses of the group, or the subgroups that we've put together, are looking at HR initiatives and best practices, industry mentorship. How can we be mentoring people, encouraging them to enter the solar space or clean energy space, community impact and investment, and then the 4th group is industry association, coordination, and collaboration, really recognizing that there are a lot of groups. And again, how can we complement and support each other and not be doing redundant work? Great.
Julo, I'd like to get your thoughts on the new BOSS group. And I know that Jason is a part of that group, but can you talk about how the BOSS group came about and what some of your initiatives are in 2021?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'd also welcome Jason to add in as well. So BOSS stands for Black Owners of Solar Services. We're actually solar and storage services. These are business owners who are all African American. And our companies are from coast to coast. There are about 20, 25 operating companies doing everything from engineering through operations and maintenance, everything along the whole spectrum of work, including some manufacturing. And so BOSS is an emerging trade association of these entities, and we have an internal focus as well as an external focus. Our internal focus is really to try to build the business competence of these organizations and to also create a space where folks don't feel so isolated with the work that we're doing. We're trying to break down that sense of isolation by creating a space where people can come together and gain increased awareness about trends and opportunities within the industry, as well as to build those core business competence functions. We're hoping that it will be a place, a clearinghouse of sorts, where there can be a depository of opportunities that folks can learn about and go after, either individually or in partnership, which is really exciting. There's already conversation among the entities about how we might work together. And then finally, there's the external focus, which is we believe that by working together collectively, we can influence the marketplace and expand the marketplace. And that's the whole reason why we wanted to come together, both for the internal as well as external aspects of that work. Jason, you want to add something?
Only that I'm really happy to be a part of BOSS and that it's sorely needed. So I think as we've come together, we've really found that the purpose and intent is already there. We're already realizing that we don't have to be so isolated. As the only African American in the state of Tennessee that's certified in NABCEP, you can imagine, as Kenneth said, being the only one in the room and just not seeing any representation. So I'm just really glad to be a part of BOSS and very much looking forward to what we can accomplish.
Great. We do have a number of different organizations represented here talking about their different initiatives. And I just want to throw it out to the group. How do we make sure that we're continuing to innovate and, innovate versus just be redundant? How are we enhancing the work that we're doing and not just doing more of the same thing, maybe in our separate silos? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Sure, I'm happy to chime in there. Well, I know at least between SEIA and Renewables Forward, we've actually formed a subgroup. So we coordinate on the projects that we're working on just to make sure that there isn't overlap and to explore where there might be areas for, say, Renewables Forward to move forward on a mentorship program if it makes more sense for them to do that work. I would love to do something similar with BOSS. Obviously, Julo and I would have to have a conversation with that and the other leaders at that organization to set that up. But I think that just by making sure that those lines of communication are open and that we have, consistent times to check in and appraise each other of the work that we're doing, we can avoid that duplication.
Awesome. And that's why we're here today, to have these discussions. I want to transition the conversation to talk about underserved communities. And we have an excellent question here to kick us off on that topic. And it's from a business owner. He's a solar business owner, Eric, and he says, how can installers expand their marketing and outreach to communities of underserved workers? Julo, I'd like to come to you with this question. You and I chatted a few weeks ago. There isn't a lot of information out there for solar contractors about how to reach out to underserved communities or frontline communities and what the needs are there. Can you talk about the gap between understanding and learning and implementation or getting solar storage on those rooftops and in those homes?
I think that one of my core values is really about being resourceful. I think that there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There are certainly institutions within communities that have always served as the place of education and communication to its neighbors. So, and they're the traditional institutions that we know of: Black-owned businesses, churches, community colleges. Other sorts of existing institutions, I think, are a really good opportunity to start a conversation with them to say, can we talk to the folks that you're talking with? And ask them what's the best way to reach out to the folks who you're talking with our message, as opposed to trying to create some new channel.
Mm-hmm. Kenneth, let's bounce over to you. You do a lot of mentorship and education. To the point of Eric's question, how can installers expand their marketing and outreach to communities in underserved, or homeowners in underserved communities? What's your experience there?
In my experience, what I've seen be the hurdle is the financing. That has been a challenge. I've seen a lot of low-income communities has been able to finance programs. But I think there are options, and I when I look at what's needed in this community, it's just a proper understanding of the financial geography of those individuals. And one of the things we do is, instead of using financing options that have high interest rates, what we use is either cash deals, and we work with we start in the communities as our a little that can afford it, and then you work your way to working with organizations like Grid Alternative to get the rest on, Grid Alternative program. They give it to homeowners for free if they don't qualify. So our homeowners, although we are canvassing them, if they don't qualify, we're giving those leads to companies like Grid. So that's one of the ways that we try to keep those communities involved.
Jason, can you talk a little bit about that intersection of the education that a lot of underserved communities need? There might be fear about getting involved in a new technology. Can you talk about how you overcome some of those barriers?
Yeah. So when I was starting to kind of put this together several years ago, after I caught the kind of solar bug, I was like, I'm not letting go of this. I don't care what China pumps into the U.S. economy. I started to understand that the financial hurdle, for our communities and just for communities in general, and the education piece is that you come across people. I had a conversation with a gentleman about solar, and he said, "Yeah, I used to do that, years ago in the 70s, but don't those systems leak?" And I was like, see, there's a gap there. They're still thinking solar thermal, they're still thinking about hot water. And so we're talking electricity, these days. So, there's those kind of gaps. And then you got into maybe 15, 20 plus years ago, where it was just out of reach financially for most people if they did look into it. But, 2009 and 10, sales, equipment costs plummeted, and now you're looking at a whole different market that it's now available to. Still not, completely available to LMI, but it's definitely getting closer. So as I learned that, I decided community solar would be the best way to go about it, so that we could do a Costco type, Sam's Club, the way I explain it to people, model, economies of scale, hopefully drops the price even further, and other people can participate. In Tennessee, that's still a challenge because of the TVA utility and the rules and everything. So what we decided was we would take it and just educate the public. So I'm the president of Tennessee Solar Energy Association, which is a state chapter of ACES, American Solar Energy Society. That's an arm that I like to use to educate the public. And then also I went to a local high school and taught the students there how to do this, and they did everything from design to installation. Everything that they didn't have to have a license for, they did. So I really believe that, and it has been a great catalyst to educate the public, put physical furniture in the community that people can go walk up to, see, ask questions about, and start the conversation from there.
Dana, I'd like to take a step back for a second. Does SEIA have any data, or can you talk about the size of the addressable market that underserved communities represent? Trying to flesh out what the real opportunity is for our contractor audience there who's listening in.
Sure. So there's actually some reports that have been released from NREL and other institutions. They do annual or semi-annual reports specifically looking at LMI households and solar potential specific to the rooftop part of the industry. And I believe the latest iteration of that report, they estimated that about 42% of all rooftop technical potential in the residential sector could come from LMI housing. So there's obviously a really a huge market opportunity there for installers if they're able to do the things like Julo mentioned and go to, say, like a local church and educate the community and use that network as a way to provide education services and then also generate business leads. There are organizations that are focused solely on doing that, like Interfaith Power and Light. They work directly with churches. There are nonprofits like Kenneth mentioned that, Grid Alternatives, they go into the community and do that work. And in some states, even, they're starting to align some of their LIHEAP funding and then also their solar programs. And that's another really good intersection because the state can help identify what customers, what individuals might potentially benefit from not only energy efficiency improvements, but also utilizing existing incentives in that state to put solar on their homes and bring down their monthly cost of electricity. So there's a lot of opportunities for overlap there, and there's a huge market potential too.
That's great. I want to come back to that energy efficiency point because I know that Jason can weigh in on that. Heather, on the financing side of things, financing, as Kenneth mentioned, has been, a real challenge in underserved communities. I'd love to get your thoughts on what you're hearing about what the financing sector is doing to address that. And one question we got from an audience, and this one is from DK, and the question is, given that minorities have below average FICO scores, how do your new loan instruments avoid discriminatory solar access? What are your comments on that?
Yeah, so I thank you for sending the question ahead of time. I was able to, it's not my area. I'm the head of human resources. I was able to check with our head of risk, and he said that they regularly review the products. They have a process that they go through, looking at the FICO score and making sure that they're not only not overtly discriminatory, but that there's not a disparate impact. But I think really the root of the question is how can we make solar more accessible, that financing can be challenging for folks who don't have a high FICO score. And I think that it's about the companies like Mosaic not just declining the borrowers, but routing them to other alternatives. Or one thing that we've looked into is how can we, rather than just declining a borrower, provide them with resources on how they can potentially improve their FICO score. So I think that, really helping to find those paths forward so that folks can find the resources that are available to help them with the funding. That's the approach that we've been taking.
Awesome. Kenneth, I want to come back to you. And, you talked earlier about being in the community, inside your community. And, we're all working in our communities and we want to support our communities and bring clean energy to folks. And you're actively mentoring folks from inside your communities, helping support them on their solar journey, their renewable energy journey. And you're also balancing that with running your own solar contracting business. Can you talk about the balance that you need to strike there?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for me, it's maybe a little easier because I'm not a large company. We probably have about 7 individuals during the time. So I do get to work closer with the installers than someone usually would be able to. And when you work, a lot of times when people come out of these communities, you think because you get them just a skill set that they would need to get into the industry, that's all they need, and they should be able to keep up with everyone else. But that isn't always the case. A lot of these individuals have other personal issues that they struggle with, and getting them the mentorship to, holding them accountable, making sure they're responsible, and coaching them when they have situations going on. Someone may have had a bad day at home with his wife, and you come to work, and usually, individuals just tough through those things. But some of the individuals can't tough to it like that, and sometimes just having someone they can talk to with them, give them some advice, maybe some personal advice, helps go a long way in keeping them driven and focused.
Awesome. Jason, let's bounce over to you to pick up on the home efficiency conversation. That's a place where folks can make a really big impact on reducing costs for folks. Can you talk about the balance for your company between offering solar and educating folks on home efficiency and the inroads you've made there?
Sure. And if you don't mind, I'm going to double back on what I was saying before. I felt like I was starting to talk a little long, so I kind of cut it short. But the great work that BayWa is doing is awesome, and part of what we need to do going forward and partnering. You're partnering with me, helping me I did the work with the high school, and now I'm getting ready to do an installation in a Black community that BayWa is helping with the equipment part of that. So I think that's going to be great furniture in that community and I'm just really excited about that. So I think that's also a part of how we educate the community, is doing projects like that with companies that can help. as far as energy efficiency is concerned, it goes hand in hand with solar. And as I started learning about solar, I learned that energy efficiency is like a bridge into solar. I talk to homeowners all the time about, let's do just our ideal project is to do a kind of a net zero approach. Let's go in and look at your demand and your issues and see if we can reduce demand such that we can we don't have to invest as much into solar. So if we can do it, because anyone that does this knows that you have a bigger, better return on investment with energy efficiency than you do solar. That's just being honest. So, and also energy efficiency is a shorter lead time. So solar can, be a while before a homeowner gets that initial conversation all the way to they're ready to sign a contract and move forward. Whereas if we're talking something as small as attic insulation or LED lights or air sealing, duct sealing, a lot of those things can be a smaller ticket and a lot more palatable, especially for low and moderate income communities. So I have used it again because of the TVA environment with solar. They basically ended residential solar. I've used it as a bridge for my business, but also even in better times, it's just a part of our offering because I think it's just the right thing to do.
Does anyone else have any comments on the home efficiency front?
I'll add a little bit there.
Please, yeah.
The model that we've developed also, InterWealth has developed with our rural electric cooperative, our pilot project, actually combines just as Jason described, community solar array with energy efficiency investments. And we're working with the rural electric cooperative who has a tariff on bill financing mechanism already in place that's based on the pay-as-you-save model that Clean Energy Works developed. And that's also a gateway for some utilities to begin offering tariff on bill financing for rooftop installations, which is really at the edge in a lot of ways. But just as Jason said, you can have immediate impact in terms of reducing that energy burden for low and moderate income people simply by replacing inefficient appliances and sealing leaky windows. So it is a really important an important intervention, and pairing that alongside on-site generation is really exciting and important work. So I would encourage all of the installers on the call to begin thinking about how can you increase your product lines to include energy efficiency upgrades.
Great.
If I could jump on that too,
of course.
I will also add to that EV. As being here in California, I know for sure we're at an EV. The mandate is to no longer even sell gas cars after 2035, I believe. And so building EV infrastructure in the cities and maintaining these charger ports is going to be something essential for any solar company to include in what they do.
For sure. I want to address a question from Sarah. She sent us a longer story about a predatory practice that she witnessed in the low income community, and I'm not sure the time frame, but essentially the customer was thrilled to be paying about $2 a month for solar. And when Sarah talked to the woman, she found out that the customer had paid for this $2 a month solar under the Obama program. And it was clear that she was misled. And she was a Spanish speaker. And when the contract had come to be signed, the contract was in English. And so the terms weren't clear. And then when the lease true up came, she was forced to make payments directly from her bank account. But, this makes everyone in the industry look bad. And I'm wondering, we need to create trust with solar customers. We need to we need to create trust in homeowners and communities. I'm wondering, just from the group, like, is this something we need to keep our eye on? Are these practices, happening? Is it common? Any thoughts on this? Dana, do you want to jump in? Then Ajulo, go ahead.
Okay, really quick. I just this is probably a SEIA question for sure, but consumer protections are a really important aspect of our business, and we certainly need to keep an eye on that. In emerging markets like the Southeast, North Carolina in particular, we're learning from the more sophisticated markets about how to improve our regulatory regime to make sure that we've got those kind of consumer protections in place. And so now we have a leasing product in North Carolina, for instance. And with that leasing product, there are provisions in our statute that spell out exactly what must go in a contract. It also spells out exactly what can and cannot be used as a part of advertising as it relates to solar. So some of our markets are starting to learn from others, but I think that kind of like the pandemic, a federal response is probably what's necessary.
Dana, any comments to follow up on that?
Yeah, happy to chime in there. So I definitely agree with what Ajulo said. This is something that our industry needs to take very seriously, and it's something as a trade association we care a lot about. We actually have a consumer protection resource portal, and I'll add the link into the chat so folks can see that. But it includes information like our solar business code, which really spells out the way that installers and other folks in the industry should be operating. We have a complaint resolution process as well. So if consumers like the one you referenced do have an issue with an installation that's performed or some sort of interaction they have with a solar business, they can actually submit a complaint through that online form. And we have a process internally where our attorneys will review that. We will reach out to the company. We will try to help come to some sort of resolution and help the customer there. And then ultimately, if outside of that issue, we're not, outside of that parameter, we're not able to resolve the issue, a consumer can go to their, attorney general's office and file a complaint. Obviously, we don't want it to get to that level. We don't think it should. We think everyone should be operating with best practices in mind. They should not be, using deceptive marketing tactics or anything like that. But there are resources available if that does occur to try to find some resolution. We also have other resources on that page. Again, I'll post a link in just a second with residential disclosures. We have model contracts on our website that are available in English and in Spanish. And so there are resources like that out there that installers can use to try to mitigate some of that. But we also, whenever we interact with consumers, we encourage them to try to educate themselves as well and protect themselves, just like they would with any other purchase. If they can try to get multiple quotes from installers, that's a really good way to make sure that they're getting a fair price. If someone, comes up and knocks on your door to sell you a car or to sell you something else, you might be a little bit hesitant to do that without looking online first and seeing if it's a good price or if there were similar offerings. So we just like to try to encourage folks on both sides to take a couple steps. But again, if there are issues, we do have some resources that folks can use. So I'll drop that link in the chat now.
Great, thank you. Before I move on, does anyone have any out-of-the-box kind of creative ways to address working in underserved communities? And I don't know what those might be, certain incentive programs that might fly under the radar of most residential solar contractors. Say a company wants to approach an underserved community or seed a project like Jason's doing in Tennessee. Are there programs or non-traditional angles that we haven't talked about that anyone wants to weigh in on? And maybe not. Jason, any thoughts?
Yeah, I just, because I don't want it to be dead air, but I think that the approach, in my opinion, is to find the Kenneth Wells and the Jason Carneys out there and push them forward and have them be the spokespeople for what you're trying to do so that you can build some trust. And then I think the sky's the limit from there. One thing that I've discussed with a company is that's trying to reach the Hispanic community and African American community with solar is partnering with large firms that have a carbon appetite that they need satisfied. So you could get into some kind of carbon trading with them where they could fund half of the installation for the carbon credits or the RECs, the solar RECs. And so now the system is half the cost. And now you can reach down to an LMI community with a system that might be, $35,000 or $40,000. That's now $17,000 to $20,000. So I think there's always a way to do things, but it's going to take the trust built, I think, first to implement those things.
Great. Thanks, Jason. I'd like to chat just for a few minutes about opportunities that we all see coming up. Ajulo, I actually want to come back to something Jason said on our previous town hall as well. And he said he thought that the fastest way for communities of color to get into the energy space was in solar. Do you feel that way? And what do you see as the opportunities growing in 2021? Where do you see the biggest opportunities?
Yeah, I do agree with Jason's comment. I think that there are going to be lots and lots of opportunities for folks to come into solar as consumers, as workers, and the part that I'm most excited about is as owners and producers. And even if you're net metering, that is still producing electricity and selling it back to the grid. So I would love for us to begin thinking about that using that framework as we think about becoming producers of electricity. The thing that I'm most excited about is the potential for the Clean Energy Accelerator, which is the federal green bank. I'm super hopeful that it will get capitalized with federal resources under the new administration and the new Congress. It has within it a 40% target for disadvantaged, low and moderate income frontline communities, which is tremendous. A 40% target of a $100 billion fund that with seed money from the federal government could leverage $2 to $3 per every dollar. And so that is a resource that if it's funded, and it only needs to be funded once, that if it is funded, could provide the kind of resources to begin to get the level of access that we're looking for, that we're all talking about.
Awesome. Thank you. And I believe that you were just appointed the point person for the North Carolina Green Bank. So congratulations.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit of a cheerleader for green banks right now.
Makes sense for sure.
Thank you.
Heather, I'd like to bounce to you. What are you excited about in 2021, whether it's on the financing side or, from Renewables Forward? What are you looking forward to next year?
Yeah, Renewables Forward, like I said, is a new group. We've been really came together in the spring, and I feel like in the last couple of months we have more clearly defined our structure and how we're going to work together. Defining that we are an initiative, we're not a nonprofit, we're not a company. How are we all going to work together? And I feel like we've put that framework in place, and we're now in the process of defining what is our 2021 plan, really focusing on the outcomes that we want to achieve and how can people participate. Like I said earlier, we really want this to be a group that's focused on action. And so I feel like a lot of the groundwork has been put into place, and we're now at a great place to take action.
Great. So I want to start to wrap up here. We've got like 4 minutes left. And we could probably talk for another hour at least, I'm assuming, but we'll leave that for another time. But I'd like to ask all of our guests for their top one recommendation. It was two, but just one recommendation for things contractors can do to support fair access to renewable energy in their communities. But before I ask those questions, I'll just make a few announcements, and Jessica will pop these links in the chat along with the million other links we've added there today. We've got a Solar Edge event tomorrow. Come and see the new Energy Hub and the new LG commercial solution Resu 16H Prime. If you're interested in getting involved in the C&I space, sign up for our commercial newsletter and join us on Friday for our next mindfulness session. So getting back to our guest, Ajulo, I want to thank you for coming. You're the founder and CEO of EnerWealth Solutions and community representative for the Boss Group. Thank you for joining us. And what's your one recommendation for solar contractors on creating fair and equitable solar communities?
You're welcome, and I'm so glad to be invited. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would say start a conversation with someone who's different from you. Surprisingly, not surprisingly, installers are entrepreneurs, and so we can get really creative, and a conversation could spark something interesting. Mm-hmm. So start a conversation with someone different than you and see where that might lead.
Great. Heather Houston, VP of People at Mosaic Solar and Steering Committee Representative at Renewables Forward. Thank you for joining us today. And what is your one recommendation for folks?
My recommendation is to think not only about what is your company doing, but who are you partnering with and what are they doing? We're going to approach this by all working together. And so I think knowing who your partners are and what their practices are keeps us all in those checks and balances.
Great. Jason, great to have you again on the show. You're the president of the Tennessee Solar Energy Association and CEO of Energy Electives. Second town hall, hope to have you on for a third. What's your one recommendation for us today?
Don't invite me back. That's the one.
No way.
I really feel like I have to piggyback off of what has been said already, especially with Heather said in partnerships. Look for the partnerships, and I'll throw out Energy Democracy. It's a book. Educate yourself on why it's necessary, because if we help our fellow man, our fellow neighbor, then we actually help ourselves. So it's an environmental thing, it's a social thing, it's all the above. So partnerships.
Great. Dana Sleeper, the Director of External Affairs at SEIA. Thank you for joining us, Dana. What's your one recommendation to create a fair and equitable solar industry?
Thanks for having me, Tom. It's been a pleasure to speak with you and with everyone else on the panel. I would say get involved, and it all starts with you. You can get involved in BOSS, the Black-owned solar owners in solar services or solar and storage. You can get involved in SEIA. You can get involved in your local ACES chapter. Whatever organization or community group makes sense, get involved, because you can then have the conversations that Ajulo mentioned. You can work on developing those new relationships with folks, or getting involved as a mentor yourself potentially. All of those sorts of changes are incremental potentially, but they add up. And also by being involved in a larger organization, you amplify your voice. That's the whole reason we have trade associations. That's the whole reason we have these leadership groups, is so that we can go in front of the state legislature and say, this is what we need to make things better. So get involved, even if it's in a small way. It really does make a difference.
Great. And we got a question from Frank who asked, can the link be shared in the chat to all the attendees? Yeah, when we send out our announcement about when the recording is live, we'll share the links as well. Kenneth, let's wrap up with you today. You're the owner and founder of O&M Solar Services. I see you've got product being unboxed and ready for installation.
I'm on a job site right now.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. What's your one recommendation for folks to create an equitable solar industry?
I would say hiring. I've been doing for the last 3 years has been on the workforce development board for Grid Alternative, And we've been working hard to create training programs that can get individuals the skills they need to get into this industry. And you have companies here in California like Tesla who have 500 openings. And we want to make sure that we partner those training programs that we're developing with those people that need to hire so that we can get those individual jobs. So I would say hiring, finding those local training programs that are in these communities and finding the right individuals to hire.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks for our audience for joining us today. This was a wonderful discussion. We want to hear from you. What do you want us to tackle in these town halls in 2021? We're going to leave the window running so you can all pull from the chat while it's fresh in your minds. But we talked about partnership today. We talked about reaching out. Great discussion. Thank you to all of our guests for joining us today and taking the time in this busy season. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Jessica, I love you.